Yeah. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us again for our monthly webinar. Today, I am joined by Emily Lark, who is the Global Executive Business Partner at Tonal. She has been with them for a little over 5.5 years, supporting their CEO. And during that time, she has went from being the sole executive assistant in the company to growing an admin team of over 6 people, as well as helping them go through 2 rounds of funding. So we're so excited to have you here with us today, Emily. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And we are also joined by Al-Husein and Madhany, who is my co-founder and our Chief Strategy Officer, and also the executive coach who has been helping Emily over the past 1.5 years as they've gone through this tremendous growth and success at Tonal. So before we go ahead and dive into our webinar, just a quick reminder for those of you who are joining us for the first time, we cannot see or hear you, but hopefully you can see and hear us. And if you can't, please let us know. But with that being said, if you have any questions during the webinar, feel free to go ahead and add them in the chat and Q&A feature. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and just field those questions towards the end of our session. So wonderful. Why don't we go ahead and get started? And so, Emily, I'm really excited to chat with you about your journey, especially at Tonal in the past 1.5 years, because you guys have grown so much. When we first connected with you 1.5 years ago, Tonal and you and Ali had been together for about, I think, 4 years at that time, right?
Yep, that's about right.
Yeah, and so at that point, like, you guys had an amazing relationship. You sort of knew each other in and out. So what kind of spurred this idea of you getting coaching and wanting to take your career to the next level?
Yeah, so I mean, if any of you all work in startups, you know that with every round of funding, the expectations from the organization, but investors, that you have to level up to that expectation. And so I was watching Ali do this successfully with the help of a coach. And I was also trying to hold myself to those standards, but I knew that I was close to hitting a wall. And so I just asked Ali, I'm like, please, are you open to this? And he, yeah, honestly, he was like, I don't know why I hadn't thought of this sooner. So yeah, that kind of kicked off this relationship here.
Yeah. And so tell us a little bit about what that journey looked like for you. Like, what did it look like to get started with a coach? What did that process look like? How did you determine which coach you were going to pick? Tell us a little bit more. Yeah. How did you pick Al-Husein?
That's a great question. So I was super intimidated by the thought of finding a coach because I had helped Ali try and find him a coach as well. And so that process it's kind of like dating, right? You have to do a bunch of research and figure out what everybody can bring to the table. And so I knew it was just going to be a ton of work. However, I was introduced to, I don't actually remember how I met you, but yeah. I thought I did. But it was super simple. Once I hopped on the call with you, Megan, you basically, it was kind of like an interview, right? You were trying to figure out what my goals were and what I was looking for. As an EVP, but also at Tonal, but also as like future Emily, what did I want out of that? And so you then put me in touch with a handful of really awesome coaches, which made it very difficult. Sorry, Al-Husein. But ultimately, it kind of came down to personality for me. So I met with everybody. Everybody brought a ton to the table, and so it was pretty challenging. But ultimately, I had the conversation with Al-Husein. Not that you said all the right things, but you said all the right things. And I knew that I could trust you, and I knew that you had the background to really back up the advice and the coaching that you were going to give me. And so that was pretty much it, I think.
Yeah. And Al, do you remember what it was like when you first met with Emily? Was there anything like specific about her personality, her experience, or like the challenges she was experiencing at Tonal that really stood out to you? Or was it kind of like every other conversation you've had with other potential clients?
So yes and no. There's 2 things specifically that stood out, and one was universal and one was specific. The universal thing is that what I'm looking for in a client is a humbleness in that they know that they don't have all the answers. And you don't know what you don't know in this role, because you, like your founder, like your CEO, like your executive, is experiencing new growth, new opportunities every week, every month, every quarter, new heights that you're climbing as you strive to increase the business and the opportunity, increasing employee count, increasing complexity in the business, et cetera. And so you need to be humble enough to recognize that you don't have all the answers and you don't know what you don't know. And what I found specific, however, to Emily was not just the universalness of being humble, but also very specifically being hungry. So what Emily has is what I call being humble but hungry to grow, because she has to want it herself. Ali cannot want it, her CEO cannot want it, I cannot want it. She has to want it herself. And so what I found in Emily was this combination of hunger but humbleness. Hunger that comes from her specific personality and where she wants to go in her career, that she wants more responsibility, more opportunity, more growth, more experience managing people, more experience doing harder things. And with that comes, of course, the reward of doing that as well, which is obviously oftentimes higher compensation, which is something she also needs to want. I can't drive that for her.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if we think back to like what the first session that you guys had and then how your coaching has kind of changed over that period of time, like how did you guys decide like how often you were going to meet, and how often did you meet, or how often do you meet now, and how do you sort of structure those sessions? Maybe Emily, do you want to start with you?
Yeah. So I believe we met twice a month whenever we first started, and that was actually really helpful because there was just so much. Once I had this person to talk to and kind of just throw all of my wants and hopes and needs at, more kind of came along. And so it was helpful to meet pretty often then, but I don't know, we basically came up with a list of like, what are your goals? Where are we going? Once we had that all down and we kind of had put the first steps in place there, then we backed off to once a month. I can reach out to him whenever I want. Thank you for that. And he was especially whenever I was building out the team, I was texting him pretty often, whether it was like help or, I don't know, just to kind of check in and make sure that I was on track. So, I think that's pretty much it. I would say our sessions are relatively casual unless I have like something very specific that I need to solve like that moment. As you've now heard, Al-Husein has a very calming presence. And so just through kind of thoughtful conversation, other things kind of come up and we just deal with them in real time. I don't think we've ever had a set agenda aside from like maybe the first one or two.
Well, so much of it depends again on the growth curve that Emily was experiencing herself, her team. She has come a very long way in 18 months, a year and a half. And she'll tell you herself kind of where she originated and where she is today. But along that path, there are very trying moments where you have to create, if you're going to build a team, a leveling structure for your team. You have to create management cadence if you're going to be a manager. You have to understand what your management style is, your leadership style. And if you have not managed people before and you want to, this is where a coach can help. But Emily is correct. Like, I work very casually and I'm available to my clients at all times, 24/7 through text. And I can pick up the phone and do a quick, just-in-time kind of help cycle before you're about to have a very stressful meeting with perhaps your team or your executive or the C-suite or a vendor or a new facility that you're about to turn on or turn online, or an office that you're about to build out in another country, and you need to think through, various things about that you may not know about, that you just want to bounce some ideas around. So that's how I operate. But Emily, I think it may be valuable to share with some folks how big your team is now and how big it was when we first started coaching.
Well, my team was 0. I was the only admin at Tonal. which is fine. But I think any of you other admins that are on the call or EVPs know it can be pretty lonely. And so the company had reached a point, we were starting to build out the C-suite. And I just told Ali, I'm like, listen, these people are going to expect help. And he's like, well, yeah, you're probably right. And so I just asked him, like, do you trust me to be able to build this out? And he's like, sure, like, go for it. This is another reason why I needed a coach, because I, to be honest, didn't really know what I was doing.
Yeah.
But I mean, now we have six admins or EVPs at Tonal, and they are, I mean, they're incredible. They have all sorts of different backgrounds. They bring a ton of different flair or flavor to the team. And it's just been, I mean, it's been awesome. I hired our first EVP, Marissa, back in June. So she's coming up on her 1 year, which is amazing. And then we'll be building out the team even further this next year. So we'll be adding additional EVPs to the team, and then we'll be building out the AVP function, which will, the AVPs will be supporting our SVPs and VPs underneath the C-suite. So it's a lot of work, but I mean, it's been awesome. It's been the best part of my time at Tonal so far. So I'm really appreciative that Ali trusted me, and that you know, I had Al-Husein on speed dial.
Yeah. And Ali, you've helped quite a few different companies of different sizes and stages build out administrative teams. So what about what Emily experienced and how you helped kind of guide her with building this team was similar to other companies? And was there anything that was different?
So there's two things I'd like to highlight here. The first is that increasingly what we're seeing in tech companies, that is companies that are, they build their futures on software, not just supply chain, but but software is an integral component of their futures. These companies are moving towards models where the executive business partner to the CEO, or, you know, the director of operations in the office of the CEO, or the chief of staff to the CEO, comes from an administrative function, much like Emily, and that the EVPs and AVPs all report centrally through Emily. And we're seeing this turn actually in the industry quite prominently, so much so that larger corporations that initially spearheaded the idea of, you know, EVPs and EAs should report directly to their principals, directly to their executives. That's now like think about the large FANG companies, et cetera, that's now turning on its head. And even those companies are demanding a centralized function within the EVP community. And so what we've done with Tonal is we've centralized the AVPs and EVPs under Emily, which gives her a lot of management opportunity, but also leverages the C-suite for Ali as a very tightly functioning C-suite, because those who manage the C-suite calendars, i.e. the time of the C-suite members, are centralized under a single individual as well. So that becomes very crucial. And so that's something that we've done with Tonal, and I think it's worked out exceedingly well, better than, you know, Ali could have imagined it, better than their HR team could have imagined it, and in line with Emily's own expectations. The second thing that I'm noticing that is different is that you don't have to do that. One does not have to centralize the administrative function under a single person. We can keep it decentralized, and the EVPs and AVPs and EAs and admins can all report directly to their executives. Those individuals still need coaching as well, because but the opportunities for growth are different in those environments. They are still there. They are different, and we have had significant success with some of our clients at Tack Advisors, and my clients specifically, and other coaches' clients achieve greatness in their roles, higher responsibilities, loftier business titles, and of course more compensation along the way, even if their function is decentralized.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen it work really well in different companies, right? I don't think there's a best, because every organization is so different. I'd be curious to know from you, Emily, you know, one of the things I remember when we first talked about coaching, we kind of going back to, that initial conversation we had with what were your goals. I think, one was building out this administrative function. Another was, helping with fundraising. And since that conversation, you've gone through 2 additional rounds of funding. So I know that, yeah, I know in a year and a half, which is wild. You've been a very busy lady. But I'd be curious to know, what did you get from coaching, or what have you received from coaching that you weren't expecting to get? And what have you learned that wasn't originally like on your list of goals?
Yeah, this kind of ties back into what Al-Husein was saying. I think when you're an admin and you report directly into your executive, the amount of time that they actually have to be able to manage you or to help you grow is basically zero. And any free time that they do have, we're the last people that are going to ask for their time. We know that it could be spent anywhere other than ourselves. But I mean, Ollie obviously would try if I did ask. I wasn't ever going to do that. And so the first thing, like what I needed from coaching, I needed somebody to help me grow. I needed to know what my role could potentially look like, because like, honestly, neither Ollie or myself really knew exactly what it could look like down the road. And so I really relied on Al-Husein to help me figure out who I was going to be in this role. And especially at Tonal, like we are still a startup. Pre-pandemic, there were like 150 people and now we're at 700, which is insane, but we're now starting to see all of these bigger titles. And so I wanted to make sure that I wasn't getting lost in the background, which again, I think happens when you're an admin. We kind of are in the background running everything else for everyone. So I needed a manager or somebody to tell me, help me figure out who I was going to be. And then also kind of somebody that was neutral in between my exec and I, to help. I mean, Al-Husein basically told Ollie, this is what she can do. This is what you should be asking her for. And he's been holding both of us accountable, which has been nice. And then on the flip side, not on the flip side, to answer your other question about what am I getting that I didn't necessarily expect? I wouldn't say I'm like overly confident by any means. I definitely wasn't whenever I started working with Al-Husein, but he's helped to build that up. Not like, kind of as a person, but mostly within my role. I know that I should trust myself and start asking for more things, and that I do deserve the time with my executive that I need, and that he should be trusting me with these much larger projects because I can do them. And so that's been huge. And that's kind of, bled throughout my entire team, right? Like I feel anytime I'm in a coaching session with Al-Husein the next day, basically all of that is just going right down to the EVP team. And I'm giving them these different, or helping to kind of create or rewrite the narrative of what an admin looks like with the help of Al-Husein. And so it's been really cool to see. It's cool to have a team, but it's cool to see them within their roles, supporting their executives.
That's exactly right, because the reality is, and anybody who's an admin on this call, an EVP or an EA on this call, you all know that you spend 8 hours, 12 hours a day thinking about your executive. You wake up thinking about them, you go to sleep thinking about them. You don't check your calendar before you go to bed, you check their calendar before you go to bed.
It's so sad.
How many hours, how many minutes, how many seconds do they think about you every day? I would argue it's less than 30 seconds a day. So who is responsible then for your own professional development? Who's responsible then when you are leading through service, as you should, with your service heart in serving your executive?
Mm-hmm.
Who then is taking care of you? Because you are not built to take care of yourself. You're putting your oxygen mask on last, not first. So that's one of the benefits of having a coach, is they can hold up a mirror to you and say, look, this is what I see, and this is where you need to grow to. And to push you and to have you spend that time thinking about yourself your own development, your own management, your own learning, so you can grow, not to serve you, but to serve the business. If you grow in your role, your executive grows, the business benefits.
Yeah. And I think it's one thing to kind of underline there is like Emily has an amazing executive. Ali is so kind and he's a great executive and he deeply cares about her. But the point you made of like, how much time are they spending thinking about you? It's not because they don't want to think about you, because if you have a great leader, they're definitely a people person and they care so much about the company. But like Emily said, there's 700 people in your company right now, plus investors they're dealing with, plus external clients, plus. And so the amount of time and space in their brain in a day is so minimal, right? Like they have decision fatigue by like 10 a.m. So like maybe even before 10 a.m. right? And so I think that that's the one thing to think about is, if you don't have somebody internally in your organization that's like an executive business partner lead or an HR business partner solely dedicated to developing an administrative team, you have to put that mask on first because nobody else is going to be there being able to truly be focused on you and your development, right? And so that's something that you have to step up as a leader and take that in on your own, because your exec's being pulled in so many different directions, right? Like that's just the reality of where they are. Well, I'd be curious to know, besides building out this admin team, like what are some other like great accomplishments that you've had at Tonal over the past year and a half that you think that you specifically can trace back to what you've learned through coaching?
Yeah, I will have to say my team again. That is like by far my. Well, I am the most proud of that. It's not that I'm. They're their own people and they're doing the work, but it's really cool to see how the C-suite has been able to level up with their partnership, which is great. And then the other, I think like Ali's growth, and I'm not saying that it's all because of me and because I've been able to level up, but that's kind of has something to do with it. He's now trusting me to take over a ton more. So like with fundraising, I'm helping to deal with all of these investors, and we're managing the data room and tracking comms and bringing on a new piece of software so that he is able to really tap into those relationships. And it's opening up all sorts of different opportunities for him, whether it's partnerships or what have you. So I think those two, the team is amazing. Ali is, like you said, he's already been amazing, but seeing him kind of level up with my assistance has been really cool. And again, just kind of, I don't stop and think about myself ever, but whenever we had this conversation, you all asked me to come on here and I did have to give it some thought. I don't know, it's cool to see the growth within myself and my role at Tonal. It's a little overwhelming, to be honest with you, but I'm here for it. I'm going to keep doing it until I can't.
Yeah.
And you wear it really well, Emily. You wear it really, really well. Listen, the thing I've seen the most in the 18 months, if there was one word, it would be confidence. Not confidence only in herself, not confidence only in Ali, not confidence only in her team and only in the business, but confidence to want more and recognize that she's deserving of more because she is a business partner to perhaps the most important person in the company who is building this thing, right? It's his vision. He's the founder, CEO. And that pays off in spades. And the second word I'd say is Emily's become a true leader. I think before she was a executive business partner, to a founder. Now she's a leader in her company, and I dare say in the executive assistant community. She has grown so much in this last 18 months that a lot of learnings, a lot of pain, and with that pain comes a lot of learnings that others can learn from as well. That's what leadership is.
Yeah. What were you going to say, Emily?
I remembered one other thing. I was not an EVP whenever I first started working with you. I was the EA to the CEO, and you helped me to convince Ali that we needed to shift from the EA title to an EVP, because I mean, we're doing it all, right? Like, why shouldn't we have that title, executive business partner? Like, that is our whole life. We're partnering with them on every single thing. And if you aren't partnering with them on every single thing, you should and you can. And again, like Al-Husein just said very nice things about me. Like, everybody deserves a coach like this, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think the other thing too to point out here is like, and we get this question a lot in our webinars, especially as of late, because there's so many people who are moving in from this title of executive assistant to executive business partner or admin manager or director of administration. And so what is that shift? And I'd be curious to know from you, and kind of what I've seen is going from being this individual contributor to supporting a CEO to really moving into this management and business partner position and really managing not only every facet of your executives' lives, but then also like the entire landscape of what being an admin means within your organization. And so that's a much more strategic position now, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, we're involved in everything. Like right now we're working on, we're in the middle of strategic planning for fiscal year 23. And I used to sit in on these meetings and take notes, which was totally fine. I like doing that, but now we're deeply involved. And so we'll be hosting our first EVP offsite, where we'll be taking the strategic planning, all the strategic initiatives that the leadership team has built out, and then we'll be rolling those down into, we'll be focusing on those during our offsite and figuring out what our role looks like in each facet of the strategic planning portion, and how we're going to hold ourselves accountable, basically ensuring that our executives are meeting the marks. I think, like, especially in startup world, I don't know, I've never worked at a very large company, so I don't know, but we talk a lot about the future and we do all of this planning, but there's so much else going on in the background that it's sometimes hard to stay on track. And so now that's up to us to make sure that we're hitting these marks and that they are staying on track, and that like, I'm not a huge fan of OKRs, but like somebody has to make sure that we actually are doing the work to make sure that we're hitting those OKRs for each fiscal year.
Yeah, the reality is, as a business partner, you are an accountability partner to your executive, and they're expecting it of you because you have the title. And so, you know, you have to show up in that way. And so it's more than just managing their calendar. It's like being their accountability partner for their own goals, which is how Emily's team is showing up. And that's the kind of up leveling that we're talking about, from executive assistant to executive business partner. It's that you choosing purposefully to be that accountability partner in all the things.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to know from both of you, kind of, I guess it's kind of an open question, because Ali, you manage people now and you've managed people in the past. And Emily, I know that you've implemented all kinds of new like tools and structures and processes since building out this team, as you have to when you start managing a multitude of people. So, you know, what tools do you use? How often are you meeting with your direct reports? What are you covering during this time to make sure that you're hitting the mark, and that you're as a team are keeping yourselves accountable for your own goals, but then also being great strategic partners and keeping your executives accountable to their goals?
Yeah.
Emily, do you want to go first?
Oh, you go. I got to think about that for a second.
Okay, you go ahead, Al.
Sure. So, you know, there are a lot of questions coming in the chat about this transition, this bridge between executive assistant and executive business partner titles. The job descriptions are similar, but not exactly the same. And it's important that when you are pitching to your people/HR departments and your executives for a new title, that you understand what the differences are. I would encourage you to check out some of the Tack Advisors former webinars, or even ping us after this if you want more explicit understanding on that. Coaches will help you get there. Will help you build out your administrative function, and will help you understand what the differences are between those job descriptions. Of course, you could Google it, executive business partner, and find stuff that way too. But convincing and influencing your HR teams and your executives to get there, we're happy to help because we've seen the model replicate itself in multiple times. Back to Megan's original question, which was, what are some of the things that we're doing that are different, and like what does the cadence look like, and how does it all work? So one of the things that Emily's gotten really good at in the last 18 months is performance management. And when you're growing as fast as their company is growing, and they're adding headcount every single day, literally people are being added to the company every single day, headcount is should be perceived as scarce. And so you've got to get the most out of the headcount that you have. And so managing performance becomes really important and a part of her job, because what do we all know about executives? They don't know how to manage their EAs or their EBPs. They don't know what the expectation is. And because there's no leveling, there's no matrix, there's no framework, and HR is not helping. One EA gets away with one thing over on this side of the house, but another EA can get away with something else because there's no common bar. What Emily does when we've centralized the function is she's created a common bar. So she understands what is somebody who meets expectations versus exceeds expectations versus somebody who meets most expectations. Those are conversations that are always ongoing. Feedback is fast and it's furious, and Emily doesn't shy away from providing her team members feedback, whereas executives often feel uncomfortable providing direct and immediate feedback to somebody who manages their calendar so intimately. But Emily is able to be that buffer between the executive and the EA, right? And say, like, look, this is where I think you need to, and spend a lot of time with them too, because it's, executives would rather text you something in 8 words and expect a change, and won't be able to spend 28 minutes dissecting all the emotions around the performance. But Emily spends a lot of time with her team. And I would argue one of the things that she has provided her executive business partner team and the executives is a level of performance management for the EAs, for the EBPs in her team that they've never had before, by holding them accountable to a very, very high bar. Part of that means there's a cadence for when you do reviews. There's obviously a tool that they use internally for performance management. She's responsible for all their compensation. She's responsible for their bands. She's responsible for their career tracking. She's responsible for the professional development, all the things that their own executives, you would wish your executive would have spent time on for you, but obviously doesn't have time for.
Yeah. Anything you would add to that, Emily? Are you meeting, do you have one-on-ones regular with your admin team? Do you have an all-team, like, monthly sync? How often are you doing review cycles? Tell us about kind of the nitty-gritty of what Al-Husein kind of just shared.
So yeah, I now that I have a team, I am not going to take it for granted. So we meet a lot. So I meet once a week for a one-on-one with each of our EVPs, and then we have a weekly EVP team sync. And then we're doing some sort of offsite like once a month. While I'm there to do the manager side of things and help with performance reviews and all of that, I also want them to tell me what this role actually looks like. And so at our offsite coming up, hopefully Al-Husein will be there to help me with this, but we'll be dealing with strategic planning and all of that stuff. But a huge portion of the time while we're together is going to be planning or talking about what does this role actually look like at Tonal. And now that we have a team of, myself included, a team of 7, and the team continues to grow, we want to go ahead and get ahead of the curve and kind of spell out exactly what it looks like. And so not just in what we're taking on within our role, but what are the expectations in terms of like the person, like when we show up every day and as the business partner to our executive, what does that look like? What standards do we hold ourselves accountable to? So we meet a ton. I meet with our executives once a month. We are going to begin sending out quarterly surveys. My HR business partner told me that I needed to come up with some sort of metric to use for performance reviews. Not just like, I think this person's incredible, we should definitely give them a raise. And so we'll also be building out this survey that we'll be sending out to the execs to gather feedback, but to also gauge kind of their growth. So I'm super excited to build that out. That'll be something else that we'll do at the offsite as well. So I think having them be in control of their role and their growth as much as I am is huge. We all hold each other accountable. So
yeah, and this is the benefit of it when it can become centralized, is that you can drive the accountability for their own destiny in their own hands. There is a spectrum, there is a distance, and one can start as an administrative assistant, an AA, and be very task oriented. And I give you a task and you execute on it, but I never give you a task that will take longer than an hour or even a day. And the budget is very minimal, both in terms of time and dollars. And then, in a very, that's administrative assistant, then there's executive assistant, then there's administrative business partner, then there's executive business partner. On the far end of the spectrum, you're living in a very highly ambiguous state. Whereas over here, I'm saying, with the administrative assistant, the entry-level administrative assistant, I'm saying, schedule this meeting before May 1st. I'm giving you a task, I'm giving you all the context, you can see it. Whereas with an executive business partner, what I'm saying is, I'm flying to London next Tuesday, I'll be there for 48 hours, build me a schedule. So what does that mean? That means the executive business partner needs to know all the context, all the investors, all my friends, all my family members, all the staff members I need to meet. They have to build out a schedule based on my priorities, my goals for the week, the month, the quarter. Highly ambiguous. I'm not telling them, oh, I need to meet with this person or this person. No, like, you figure it out, because I can't spend the time and energy to think, because you're my right hand, you're my right brain. So it's going from task to partnership, right? And I think what, to your question, Megan, and to what Emily said, driving that kind of growth with your team so that you can become that business partner who becomes that right brain, that right hand for the executive, is really what Emily's doing. And she did it herself. So she knows what it looks like. She knows what it means to have full context, to live in a highly ambiguous state, right? Where there's ambiguity is high, and context is also high. And because she's come a very long way. And so she's doing that for her own team members.
Yes, I assume that I should be doing all of these things, but I do kind of want to tie it back to working with you. I didn't, you were asking me like, so are you doing X, Y, and Z? And I'm like, I'm doing one of those. I didn't really think that I could take on the other part. And you're like, well, why not? And so it was really helpful through our coaching. You were encouraging, but also pushing me. Like, if I'm stressed out and I need to like talk to you about something that's going on, you're there and you understand, and that's all fine and good. But whenever you know that it's time for me to get uncomfortable, you help me get there. And so a lot of my growth, like, sure, I did it and that's nice, but it was mostly, it was with your help. Like I don't think I would be where I'm at in my career without having you there, a coach there, or whatever, to help push me to reach those goals and to hold me accountable. Because my exec, love him. He's not doing that.
Emily, you can't see this because I'm a brown man, but I'm blushing. But it's the best athletes in the world have coaches, right? The best Olympians, heads of state have coaches. The best executives, the best CEOs in the world have coaches, because of the drive and the ambition to achieve more for ourselves and for our teams. So thank you for saying that. But remember, it takes somebody who's humble enough to recognize that they need it, and hungry enough to demand it of themselves and want it.
Yeah. And I think one thing I kind of underscore in that, because Al-Husein, although is my co-founder, is also my pseudo coach. And we have these conversations all the time, and he kind of helps me see my blind spots. And I think the important thing to think about, and even going to like trying to decide, like, are you ready for a coach? are you ready to receive this kind of information? And I think is great about you, Emily, is that like you come from a place of curiosity and like kind of as instead of humbleness of like, I didn't know I could do that, but okay, I'm open to hearing that feedback, and all right, I'll try it. And that I think is what's so important, because people can receive feedback all day and get instruction and get information, but if you're not open to hearing that, or being curious or getting uncomfortable and saying like, oh, there's a totally different side of the situation I didn't even think existed. I didn't even realize I was being perceived this way. I didn't even think something like this was possible. Like, you're going to hit a wall and probably not be able to grow or excel the way that you should be, if you have that kind of coach.
Yeah, totally.
That's exactly right. The other side, like we all live very comfortably. What a coach does is that he, she, they force you to find your place of discomfort and spend time there. Because it's only through discomfort will you grow. Because we're all
I think we have that on our Instagram somewhere.
Exactly. Like, it is only through discomfort that you can grow. And so what a coach does is it forces you to live in that place of discomfort, so you can push yourself to grow beyond it. So then you can look back and be like, wow, like, look where I've come.
Yeah. Amazing. So I think my sort of last question, and then we can kind of open it up to additional questions that we've received, is, why are you still getting coaching, Emily? I mean, you've come so far, you've built a team. Like, what else do you feel like you still need to know? And do you think you'll ever stop having a coach?
First of all, it is a total luxury to have a coach. I think everybody should have one, but I also don't want to take it for granted. As long as I can work with a coach, I will continue to do so. I don't think, as long as you're growing as a human being and within your role, it's helpful to have somebody there, like we just talked about, to help make sure that you are staying on track and you are meeting these goals so that you continue down this path that you've chosen for yourself. I don't know. I really hope I don't ever have to give up my coach. I mean, my exec works with a couple of them. He totally realizes the importance. Yeah. Sorry, that was like very not the best answer, but
no, I think it's a great answer.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's honest, right? And the reality is, like, that a lot of us have therapists, a lot of us don't have coaches. I think coaching is the new professional development. Therapy is backwards looking. Coaching is forward looking, and we spend so much of our lives career oriented that not to have a specialist at your side who understands your own trajectory, and who's been in your shoes and knows where you need to go, I think is a disservice to yourself and also to your company. This is why people departments, HR departments have budgets for professional development. And as you climb the ranks, those budgets are more bespoke, and those budgets are for coaching. The CEO is not going to attend a 3-hour webinar on X, Y, or Z. They are going to spend 3 hours with their coach, right? And so the higher you rank, you grow, the more this becomes critical and crucial, particularly for those who want to advance their careers.
Well, I have a very interesting question that just came in that I think is great, because I've definitely been asked this before. So I'd love to hear your perspective from both of you. Is how do you thoughtfully suggest to an executive if they need a coach? So not you yourself, because maybe you need a coach too, but what if you see perhaps there's some blind spots that your executive is having, and how would you suggest going about encouraging them to get a coach and some additional support?
Yeah, I'm dealing with this right now.
Oh, Emily, how are you handling it?
Yeah, so Ali works with, like I said, he works with a couple of coaches. They kind of tackle different things. But that's been really helpful whenever we've suggested to the other C-suite members. Honestly, it's not like hey, you have this issue, like you need to get a coach, we can't fix it. It's mostly like, we need to each make sure that we're leveling up and growing with this role to make sure that we're keeping up with the company as it grows out of control. And so just suggesting, I basically told all of the EVPs, I'm like, listen, this is a really cool opportunity for your executive. The company is going to be paying for them to get a coach. This is not offered everywhere else. I need you to help them find somebody. And so some are excited and some are kind of like, what do you mean I don't really need a coach? And so Ali has done a really good job of explaining to them the benefits that he's received from working with a coach and how it kind of translates to his current role. And I think, again, salary. Like I keep talking about him not having time. He has lots of time for a lot of things, not for managing his admins or really his C-suite members. And so working with a coach is also the same thing for me, right? Like I need to have a manager. I need to have somebody that's holding me accountable. They also need to have somebody outside of Tonal. And so that's been helpful. And I think the other thing as well, when you're working with, we have a chief people officer and he does a really good job of helping to grow and coach the C-suite, but sometimes there are things that the C-suite member doesn't want to talk about with this guy. And so it would be nice to have this neutral party and to have somebody else's, another person's perspective on a problem. Like we can't figure it out at Tonal. Maybe this person will have the answer, at least a suggestion on how to like get back on track. And so TBD on whether or not they'll continue to be excited and the ones that aren't will, but yeah, I'll let you know.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things you shared there that stand out to me, and this goes both for coaching for your executive and then also coaching for yourself, is that that confidentiality piece of like being able to be vulnerable and talk through situations that you wouldn't feel comfortable talking to like an HR business partner or perhaps another colleague. And so I think that's a huge piece. I know I love Ali because he refers us to all of his friends when they're looking to level up. So he's a great spokesperson for coaching. So I think that, having other friends or that are other executives that are friends of your executives who have had it, that can kind of like drop it in and say, hey, this has worked really well for me. That's another really great way, because people love, doing what works well for others. Like they want to know and do something that has worked in the past.
Yeah.
Al-Husein, what about you? Because you're also a people manager within your own company. And so do you see this challenge either in your current company or in companies you've seen in the past where you've had to help encourage people to get that additional support?
Yes. Two things. As a head of people or head of HR, I'm always thinking about how to up-level our people, particularly our executives and directors. So the first thing is you have to ask people who they want to become, not who they are today, but who do you want to become? And it starts with a metric, like, do you want to be a $10 billion company? Do you want to be a $100 billion company? Like, what is your goal? And who are you along that trajectory? Because what you're doing now is not going to get you there. And so they have to have that come to Jesus moment. But it starts with a question of like, well, who do you want to become? Because the habits that got you to $1 billion valuation or a $5 billion valuation are not going to get you to a $100 billion valuation or a $250 billion valuation in a public market. So we have to change your habits. So if that's your goal and that's who you want to become, a CEO of a $250 billion company, my advice would be, like, what you're doing in the past is not what got us here. It's not going to get us there. So let's find you the support you need. The second thing is, there is executives sometimes are hesitant because they don't want to open the kimono and reveal so much to this third party. I'm like, look, they've signed an NDA. It's better that you reveal it to them than to me. And to your spouse and to your EA. Like, it's better. Trust me. You also use this as an opportunity to try out certain conversations that you want to have, hard conversations you want to have with your own team members. Maybe it's about headcount plans. Maybe it's about, somebody that you're trying to perform out on the executive team. A coach is there to be that third party for you, that buffer. And don't think you're going to get all things from all people. It's okay to be promiscuous with your coach. You can have 2 coaches. You can have 3 coaches. You can have you go to this one person for like hard people problems. You go to this other person for business strategy, right? And that's okay. Don't think like you got to share all things with this one person. Because then you're burdening it too much. You're burdening the relationship too much. Just go to people for what they're experts in.
Yeah, I think you bring up an interesting point, because this is one of the things I see a lot when people come to us and are interested in coaching and have the same challenge that Emily had when She first started, where she's like, but I liked all of them. They were all great. And I go, well, just because you choose this one now doesn't mean you can't work with the other one in 6 months and a year from now, or maybe you want to work with those simultaneously, because I think you make a really good point, Al-Husein, is that coaches have different specialties. They bring different value to the table. They have different experience. And so that's something that not only is relative for your exec, because I know a lot of execs who have like 3, 4, 5 coaches, depending on what it is they're trying to work on, but it goes the same of being an executive business partner. Not all coaches that we work with have experience building admin teams and doing management. Some of them are much more, on building yourself and confidence. Some of them are much more technical in nature. And so I think it really just depends on like what it is that you want right now, and what you're looking to achieve 6 months from now, a year and now, 10 years from now.
The last thing I'd say on that is sometimes executives are blind to how they're showing up. Because sometimes we don't know how we're showing up. Like I'd like to know how I'm showing up, and Megan gives me that feedback, and other people give me that.
Gives me that feedback.
And so but we need a mirror. Like I think I'm showing up this way, and I'm motivating in this way, but actually what I said was quite demotivating. Oh, I didn't mean it that way. And humans are so messy. Like humans are very, very messy. Just as a species. And communication happens over this kind of format, Zoom, and through words, but also expressions, and people take away different things from a conversation. Even though your words may have been correct, their interpretation of that based on body language and other factors may have been, the exact opposite. So the other piece of being a coach, of expressing the need for an executive to have a coach is, are you sure you're showing up the way that your team needs you to, that you think you are?
I think that's a good point, and kind of goes into a question that we just had come in, which is, what is the best advice you have for an ever-growing EA team in regards to their challenges of connection and alignment? And I think this is super important, especially now in an even more remote world. How do you stay connected to each other? How do you stay aligned on what your goals and priorities are? Is that a daily conversation? Is that a quarterly conversation? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I think it kind of just boils down to communication and consistency, whether that means like actual phone calls, whether it's offsites, or like I use I had a really hard time whenever the pandemic first started, with a million things, but mostly trying to figure out how I was going to stay connected with my boss. And granted, I didn't have a team then, so this has nothing to do with that, but a cool tool kind of rolled out of this. So I was used to sitting across the desk from him. I could bother him whenever I wanted. And so I went from being able to like see him all day long to not seeing him and not knowing how he was doing, how he was feeling, what was actually going on. And so we created, I think this was actually with the help of Al-Husein, the notes app on your phone, your computer, whatever. We created a shared rolling note. And so we have our priorities listed there. He has upcoming board meetings that are listed there, and then his entire calendar, but mostly we're sending messages back and forth to each other all day long. And so I think I went from feeling pretty lost and honestly kind of freaked out because I just didn't know what this role was going to look like in a virtual world, to feeling so much better. And I think like knowing that we were still in it together, that I kind of knew where his head was at, was helpful, and kind of kept things moving forward. And it definitely like helped with, you know, fears that were hanging out in the back of my mind. So unfortunately, like with any relationship, whether it's your husband, your wife, your boyfriend, your boss, it does all kind of boil down to communication and what works best for you all. I mean, Tonal is, we talk a lot. Like we were in a lot of meetings. There's little room for people's minds to wander, for sure. But I think that's what keeps us tight. So
the other thing that Emily's not mentioning that she does, because it's so commonplace now for her and her team, is, you heard it earlier, she gets together with her EA team once a month, physically, in a fully remote world. She's forcing them, they want it as well, but to come together, because she understands like that is crucial for their own alignment. Same thing with the executive team. She flies to be with Ali wherever he is a few times a month, a few days a month. And so, because that is a commitment that she has made to herself and to her accountability partner, Ali, right? And so physicality in a remote world is crucial, because last time I checked, we're still human, and humans need that. We need physicality. We need physicality, and the emotional charge that comes from being physically in somebody's presence is much deeper than on a two-dimensional screen.
Yeah. I really piggyback on all of that too, of like regular communication, kind of going back, we talked before of like you're regularly having one-on-ones every week. You're having a team sync to talk about alignment, right? Every single week. You're having a monthly in-person where you're all getting together. I think all of that is super important, whether you're building an admin team or you're building a sales team, or you're like, it doesn't matter. We do the same thing here. And if we can't all be together in the same place, we at least like small groups of us will like meet up in pockets, right? Because that in-person time I think is super important, but it's just, you're constantly like staying focused on what are the goals and keeping like that conversation top of mind in every type of communication.
Yeah, it's also wild how much work you can get done when you're in person. Like I'm flying to Toronto on Sunday morning, to meet with my, we went from C-suite, they're now called SLT. You know, with the EA to EVP change, they decided to spruce up their title as well. But anyways, we're going to Toronto. The SLT group will be meeting for a day and a half, and they do this once a month. And they get more done in that, you know, those 36 hours, not that they're together the entire time, but it's like a full day meeting, a dinner, and then a half day meeting, and they're set for the entire month. Like they get so much work done. It's the same thing with the EVP team. So I don't know. I just miss being back in an office.
Yeah. All right. Well, I really appreciate both of you for being here today, and Emily, you especially, for talking about your journey and all of your amazing growth and experience over the past year and a half. And for those of you who are joining us, if we weren't able to get to your questions, feel free to ping us directly. Happy to follow up with you to get answers. Al-Husein, it's always a pleasure. We don't see each other nearly enough, and I only saw you 3 weeks ago.
No. How can folks on this call learn more about coaching and Tack Advisors, Megan?
Yeah. So anybody who has attended this webinar today or has registered is going to get a follow-up email from us today with a link to learn more about our coaching. So you can go ahead and click through and schedule a time to speak with me or somebody on my team if you're interested in learning more about our program. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you all.
Bye.
See ya.